Hello and welcome to this month's newsletter with me, Phyllis Brown. And wow, how life has changed for all of us, both here in New Zealand, but on a global scale as well. We're all having to think about our lives really, really differently and doing things differently. And I think for us in New Zealand, being in this lockdown situation, we're having to really appreciate actually what maybe we do get from our work environment, or maybe appreciate what our partners do for us when we're not in each other's company all of the time. But maybe appreciating our family time or our sacred space or our quiet time. So it's a really interesting dynamic right now. And I think for many of us who've never worked from home, then yes, it's how do we adapt and change? And I know from some of my fellow business people in the networking group do actually like being in the office, like the structure of the office. They go into their own persona when they're at the office. They can be a particular person when they're in their office, and then that structure is gone. So it's a really, really interesting time. I think the key thing about where we are right now is that this is a time of reflection. We're having to really look at some of our habits or our rituals, because they will have changed. So that drive to work, the going and getting the coffee, then in the office, the water cooler moments that you would have with your colleagues, the drive home, all of those rituals and habits that sustain us, and they're very unconscious. So we've got this really sort of heightened awareness of things that we would do quite unconsciously, and now we're having to adapt to what does that feel like for us right now, and what are we doing with our time right now. And one of the key things to think about, I believe, during this time of reflection is how we're coping with our fear and how we're coping with new ways of communicating with each other, how we're coping with the family dynamics that are going on. What does that feel like for you? And we're having to really dig really deep into those elements of patience and kindness and tolerance, being non-judgmental, because our space is being invaded. We're allowing people to see into our homes that normally we wouldn't allow our work colleagues to maybe see our home environment. So all of that is creating different levels of stress or different levels of awareness for people. And again, that's all new. Everything's new. So reflection and renewal. The one thing to remember is that the new habits that you will be creating, because it takes 4 weeks for the muscle memory, both in mental, emotional, and physical muscle memory, to create a new habit in your life. So we're all out exercising more. We've got the board games out. We're home cooking. We're home baking. So we're really almost going back to my childhood, which was playing outside or board games and home cooking. No bought biscuits, no lollies filling the cupboard. We had to create our own sweet treats, etc. So all of those habits that you've created and all of those habits that you've involved your children in, by the time you get to 4 weeks or 5 weeks or 6 weeks, whenever the lockdown finishes, those will be really ingrained. So you might actually find that new renewal that I'm talking about, that sense of renewal. And that sense of renewal might be that actually fast food might not actually have a place in your life. You might not actually digestively be able to tolerate all those saturated fats, the high salt content, high sugar content type food, because you're cooking from scratch. So again, that renewing what we're feeding our bodies, renewing our connection with food, renewing our perception of what was the normal back then and what is our new normal as we move forward through post-lockdown space. So there's lots of things to think about and lots of ways that we can continue to improve our sense of well-being, improve our sense of connectedness, improve our values and what we do value, because we're all having to, especially here in New Zealand, we've got the minimum wage supplement coming in, so we're having to sort of restrict ourselves and think about, well, how do we live off of this, and can we live off of this, and what does that look like? What does that buy us? Where's the value? What value are we going to get out of this much reduced income? So lots of levels going on at the moment of recognition, reflection, and then the renewal. And I think if I was then to reflect this out on the bigger scale, the global scale, I think globally people will be really looking at the importance. What do they value? May not necessarily be shopping every weekend, but it is maybe about family time, simpler things, simplifying their life, remembering loved ones, and especially for those who didn't have an opportunity to say goodbye to their loved ones, looking at who they have around them and thinking about, well, now's the time to spend more time with them. I don't need to spend time over here, I need to spend time over there. So on that global scale, it's been quite confronting in terms of our own human mortality. And, there, but the grace of God go, where if you're fit and you're healthy and you're being kind to yourself, then that's a wonderful place to be right now. In reflecting on the COVID virus, I haven't really said very much because there's lots of information out there. There's really technical stuff from the governments. Then there's maybe some things that are more in that conspiracy theory type thing. There's a lot of information out there, and I've been really mindful. I think is maybe the right phrase for me. Really mindful of just reflecting on my own journey when I was impacted by lung illness. It took me a year to recover from my lung illness. Symptoms are very, very similar to what this condition is right now. Couldn't actually get air into my blood system. In fact, my lungs were literally packing up. And at one point, I think I got to the point where I could do about 9 steps. And this is someone, I'm not the best physically active person, but could certainly walk around my garden quite a few times at a good pace. And we have a racetrack here, so we definitely walk around the racetrack, do sort of 5 or 10 kilometers quite easily. But to get down to only being able to do 7 to 9 paces and then not being able to breathe, that was a really scary time. It was a very scary time for myself, and it was a very scary time for my family. And like COVID-19, we, on the right-hand lung in particular, we couldn't get the liquid out of the lung. And I was in hospital a lot. I was in hospital a lot. So I've actually been reflecting on that time and what that journey meant for me. And lung issues are definitely wrapped around grief, unexpressed grief, held on to grief, old grief, unrecognized grief, anything around grief. And so I had to do a lot of reflecting, going right back to my childhood, to memories which through that whole year-long episode with my lungs, I managed to piece together really fragmented memories of when I was very, very young. and some really personal history stuff, which I won't go into, but in finding out about my family's history and events that I witnessed, I was then able to lay that grief to rest. I was then able to come to terms with those sense of loss, come to terms with what was happening in my life at that time. And then I worked my way through all of my grief processes from the age of 4, the loss of my father, and before he actually passed away. So I was able to put all of that into process. And then working with a friend at the time in the loss of her baby, which kicked off the loss of my near-death experience at the age of 4 as well. So there was a lot going on for me in that expression of dis-ease in my body, let's say, through the lungs, through this constant liquid being stored in the right hand lung, right down, fully right down to the bottom of the lung, and not being able to oxygenate my blood at all. I think I went down to about 20% oxygen levels in my blood. So yes, my body wasn't breathing at all. My lungs weren't breathing at all. However, through that dogged determination, through some amazing help from other healing practitioners, I did come out of it at the other end. And so I really reflected on my own personal journey with a lung issue. But in talking to a practitioner yesterday, and we were talking about this sort of the global impact and about Mother Earth, and it really made me think about what Mother Earth has been through quite quietly, in terms of our pollution levels, etc. And in talking to her, I was really struck by the thought that what has happened in terms of humanity. We've been locked down, industry has stopped, pollution has reduced. Our impact on the planet's surface has been reduced, vastly reduced, by lack of flights, staying at home, curfews. So the planet, Mother Earth, is having a bit of a breather. She's having a bit of a breather. And in reflecting about, well, what did my experience with my lungs mean for me? And we think about the lungs and all the capillaries and the veins and the channels that our lungs are created with. I happened to just muse with my lovely friend yesterday about how, if we think about our waterways and our oceans, that's like the veins, it's like the capillaries, the veins on Mother Earth, and how amazingly clean and clear they're becoming. She's detoxing and she's purifying through us having to stay at home. Her veins, her capillaries, that water is the key to life. It is the absolute key to life. And I was drowning in my emotions, literally drowning in my emotional debris in my lungs. But here on Mother Earth, through human activity being vastly reduced, we know that lakes and rivers and canals are cleaning up. We know that from those satellite pictures, the smog's dissipating, the air quality is vastly improved. And we all know that the lungs of Mother Earth are our trees and our plants. That's her lungs. And so I want us to reflect. So I then reflected with my friend, another musing popped up. And I reflected about, well, we as humans, I don't know how the rainforest in the Amazon rainforest, how those fires started. I would imagine it was the burning and the cleaning and the clearing by humans to propagate planting. That fire had been on for a long time. That's a huge lung. That's a massive lung on the earth. And then here in this side of the world, down in the southern hemisphere here, over here in Australasia, we've had the most fierce, the biggest fires I think in recorded history in Australia. And again, Mother Earth's lung was burning and disappearing and, dissolving in front of our very eyes. Those fires going from one location to the next, jumping, and huge swathes of our forest canopy in Australia. Another huge landmass. I think people forget how massive Australia actually is. I think you can fit the whole of Europe in Australia. So as a landmass, it's very important for planet Earth. And the forest and the vegetation there is as equally as important as the Amazon. And yet here, both those two lungs, if you like, have been hugely impacted by those forest fires. And now that we're in lockdown, not only do we see our rivers, the capillaries, the water, the life force energy? We are 80% water. We need water. We're 80% water. The land mass of the planet is 80% water. It's so vital. It's so vital, both for us as individual humans, for our animals, but also for our plant life as well. And here we're purifying that through this lockdown globally, not just individual countries, but globally. As a species, we're being confined to barracks, and the positive impact on that will be immeasurable. It will be seen in the growth rings of our trees in many years to come, in hundreds of years to come. They're chopping down what will be saplings right now. They'll be able to say, well, that was a COVID-19. The COVID-19 event, because look at the growth process. Look at what was not present in the air during the growth period of this particular plant. And so Mother Earth, on some level, and I don't want to get too woo-woo, but on some, I don't know what I mean when I say woo, I'm going to have a little giggle there. I don't know what I mean there. But there is a process where Mother Earth is taking back control, and she's confining a particular species, which is the human species, to barracks. She's allowing Mother Nature, because there's an amazing amount of pictures of animals, wild animals, coming into streets and towns and villages that would never be there if the human species was out stomping around, driving around, being human. So Mother Nature, for me, she's definitely resetting. She's resetting something that will always maybe be beyond our knowing. I don't know. Again, this is just my personal musings. I have no foundation other than reflecting on my process. And is Mother Earth grieving on some level and forcing a sense of renewal so that her lungs get the best possible opportunity to retrench and renew and regrow? I just want you to think about that. Just think about what that might mean. Because I feel, with pictures already coming out of Australia, the fires have flown through and green life comes up. Shoots and flowers and saplings are all coming up. Is it that she just wants some time just to allow her lungs to repropagate, her lungs, planet Earth's lungs, to recolonize, to regrow, to repopulate, so that in 100 years or 200 years, 300 years, that somehow it will have a really positive impact. And I think with all of the young eco activists out there, with Greta's, wandering around the world, getting our message out there. Is this part of the universe's bigger plan? I don't know. I don't know. But if we were to think or just visualize Mother Earth as a set of lungs, if you were to picture what the lungs actually do for us, how they support us, how they provide life, giving oxygen to every part of our body. I know I was very confronted by that. I was really confronted by my own mortality at one point when I was lying in hospital, going through a very particularly bad episode in hospital where literally, quite literally, there was no oxygen left in my body, and I was definitely feeling my essence sort of dissipating, leaving my body. So, if we think about the planet Earth and the lungs of the Earth, what is happening to the lungs of the Earth right now? We're in the southern hemisphere, so obviously for us, we're at a time of renewal. We're coming into our autumn. The leaves are falling, they're turning beautiful shades, all different shades of browns and golds. The grass is growing. We're coming out of our drought season, so our grass is renewing. The fields are renewing. The earth will be renewing because it will be laid bare and it will be ready to repropagate next year. Whereas the northern hemisphere, you guys, everything's blooming. So your trees are blossoming, your flowers are blossoming. You haven't come to your drought season yet. You haven't come to that aspect. So the planet itself, in terms of functionality, there is a sense of renewal from that grassroots level, that third dimensional, the elemental level is having a reboot and a renew. And our lakes and our rivers and our canals, even our seas, I would imagine the pollution in the sea might be markedly different now through lack of traffic, better air quality above it, all that sorts of things. What is happening? What is going to happen? And how far down the line, is it 5 years or 10 years, 100 years, will we actually see the true impact, the beneficial impact on our planet and the lungs and her lungs? So I just wanted to share a little bit of a musing that I had with a friend and fellow practitioner yesterday, and just reflecting and let you know where I've been reflecting. I've been reflecting on COVID-19, not from a fear perspective, but just from my own personal journey. And I do actually have a journal, a year-long journal of my illness. It's in my computer. And it was a day-to-day thing. It was definitely a day-to-day thing for me of being able to breathe or not being able to breathe, or ambulance rides, or my husband having to bundle me in the car and get me to hospital to get, the oxygen forced into my body so that my body did have oxygen. And even through one of the coughing episodes, which was a constant cough. So for me, my journey started with a cough. It was a 6-week cough. It turned into a 6-month cough. It then turned into a year-long process. But in one of the coughing episodes, I'll always remember, I was coughing so hard I broke 3 ribs down the back of my spine. And yes, clinging on to the kitchen sink, completely paralyzed by pain, couldn't move at all. So yet another ambulance journey was called for. The ambulance arrived. I was given some yummy painkillers. I have to say, the nicest painkillers I've ever had. So they could actually let go of the kitchen sink. And another journey into hospital and more oxygen pumped into my body. And just, been given some painkillers to cope with the broken, cracked ribs. So, it's it's an interesting time, a very, very interesting time for that reflection. And so that's really where I've been. And renewal, definitely. So think about it from a very personal perspective of what are we renewing within our own families? What are we reconnecting to? Childhood games or childhood processes, childhood cooking recipes. What are we reconnecting to as families? But on a global scale, what actually is happening for Mother Nature in terms of her capillaries, that life force of water, and her lungs. It's interesting. It's a very interesting process. And hopefully, for yourselves out there, I know for those of you who watch and read my newsletter, you watch my little video clips, I feel really honored because you do write to me and you give me lots of feedback. Usually it's in the form of, I'm so glad that's what you're going through, because that's what I'm going through. So, I want to reassure you that, yes, I'm going through this with you, absolutely with you. But maybe, hopefully, I've given you maybe a different perspective to look at this and what we're all contributing as a global community and as a human species, what we're actually contributing globally to Mother Earth and the wellness of the planet. And she's in control. She's definitely in control of what's happening right now with the help from our governments who are taking either good precautions or not quite so good precautions. So for those of you that are in countries that feel really supported by your governments, just wonderful. I know here in New Zealand, we feel the short, sharp shock. That's a very hard phrase to say. Seems to be working here for other countries. They're trading through, and that may be working for them. So it's horses for courses. Every country's doing it slightly differently. So that's my reflection on COVID-19. So, and that's a very personal reflection for me. It's not scientifically backed or anything. That's just my perspective on the whole, where COVID-19 affects and what that particular organ means to us on a spiritual level. The good news is that Nathan and I have been busy bees. And so we've got a couple of live masterclasses coming up. So you can join me from the comfort of your own home. Another psychic development class. It is the most popular class that I've got. Developing your intuition, recognizing your intuition, finding tools to help you through that process. And for the first time ever, I'm going to hold a masterclass on my Crystal Healing Course 101. So it's the very basic level. They've at really good competitive prices. But what we've actually done is that we've reduced all of the online courses to $29 just to make it really affordable. So the really wonderful news is that there's a couple of new courses that I've actually managed to complete, and they're out there. So there's a Transform Your Life course, and that's really from a meditation class that I did. I am a Transform Your Life coach. So good video content there of me walking you through the course content, giving you some ideas about how to reflect and how to create. And then there's a video. So there's a video class of me walking you through the content, and then there's a meditation. So there's an actual individual meditation per class. But really excited to be launching, it's in my newsletter, a brand new course, and it is the Animal Vibrational Therapy course. So this course was created about 4 years ago, maybe even 5 years ago, with Angela Ratt, a good friend of mine. And this was part of her Reiki Master Teacher training. She wanted to create a Reiki healing course for animals. So we called it Animal Vibrational Therapy. It is going live as we speak. So by the time you've watched this video, it will be live. And $5 from the $29 fee is going to be donated to the Christchurch Cat Protection League, because as you can imagine, with the COVID-19 lockdown, charity begins at home. It always does. So charitable contributions or donations are not quite as buoyant as they have been in the past. So $5 from every course that's purchased on the animal vibrational course will be donated to CPL. So I'm really excited about that too. So that's all my news here from Christchurch, New Zealand. It's a beautiful autumn day. I do love autumn. It's my favourite. Spring and autumn are my favourite seasons. And I hope that you've enjoyed my perspective on this month. Take time just to think about your reflection and your renewal. We'll be having to be thinking about where we're going after our lockdown phase. But in the meantime, please stay safe, be kind, and yes, enjoy the new habits that you've created. Until the next time, I'm Phyllis Brown. Namaste.